Cradle of civilization, the rise and fall of Sumer and Babylon. Between two rivers, dawn breaks over a landscape that will change history. The first rays of sunlight illuminate the broad, flat plain between two great rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. This is Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, where humanity's greatest experiment would unfold on alluvial soils stretching 15,000 square kilometers from the Persian Gulf to the Syrian desert. The rivers dominate everything here. The swift, flowing Tigris, running 1,150 kilometers from the Taurus Mountains, and the meandering Euphrates, extending 2,800 kilometers, converge to form the Shat al-Arab before emptying into the Gulf. Each spring, snowmelt from distant highlands sent these rivers surging, depositing mineral-rich silt that created soil with unparalleled fertility, capable of yielding 30-fold returns on grain, sustaining harvests twice annually in some areas. This agricultural potential made southern Mesopotamia unlike any other region in the ancient Near East. Yet these rivers were fickle benefactors. Unlike Egypt's predictable Nile, the Tigris could rise 10 meters in a single day, devastating entire settlements. Archaeological evidence at sites like Shuruppak, modern Farah, reveals layers of silt 4 feet thick. Silent testimony to catastrophic floods that may have inspired the later flood myths recorded in the Epic of Gilgamesh in biblical accounts. This perpetual uncertainty shaped the Mesopotamian worldview, a cosmology where capricious gods controlled human fate. The earliest settlers, the Ubaid people, 6,500–3,800 BCE, established distinctive settlements like Eridu, site of the earliest known temple dedicated to Enki, god of fresh water and wisdom. At Tel al-Ubaid itself, tripartite houses with central halls surrounded by smaller rooms indicate sophisticated architectural planning even in these early communities. By 5000 BCE, they had developed an impressive irrigation technology. Gravity-fed canal networks with main branches up to 15 meters wide and secondary channels to distribute water to distant fields. The Ubaid farmers cultivated 6-row barley, emmer wheat, and flax, using copper sickles by the 5th millennium BCE. They stored grain in distinctive beehive-shaped communal silos, managed by emerging elites who redistributed food during lean periods. Recent excavations at Abu Salabik revealed carbonized remains of date palm cultivation from this period, the beginning of the date industry that would become central to Mesopotamian economics. By 4000 BCE, a profound transformation was underway. At Uruk, this evolution is visible in 16 successive building levels spanning 1,000 years. Level 4, 3400–3100 BCE, marks the emergence of true urban life, with the city's walls eventually encircling 250 hectares. The monumental limestone temple and Eanna precinct, dedicated to Inanna, goddess of love and war, required organized labor on an unprecedented scale. The limestone temple alone used 200 tons of limestone transported from quarries 80 kilometers away. Within Uruk's walls, cylinder seals, small stone cylinders carved with distinctive scenes, marked the emergence of personal property and administrative control. The earliest known king list names Enmerkar, legendary builder of Uruk, and Gilgamesh, who supposedly constructed the city's massive walls with baked bricks measuring 35 x 35 x 10 centimeters. What made these developments revolutionary was the invention of writing around 3200 BCE. The earliest tablets from Uruk Level 4 contain no literature or royal proclamations, but mundane economic records: 34 sheep, 7 goats, 19 jars of barley. Found in the context of temple complexes, these records document the collection and redistribution of resources by an institutional economy. The pictographs, impressed on clay with a reed stylus, initially numbered around 2,000 signs before evolving into the more abstract cuneiform with about 600 standardized characters. Trade networks expanded dramatically in this period. Lapis lazuli from distant Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, copper from Anatolia, and gold from Egypt flowed into Mesopotamian cities. The invention of the potter's wheel around 3500 BCE led to mass-produced beveled rim bowls, standardized vessels likely used for distributing rations to workers. Archaeological evidence from burials at the Royal Cemetery of Ur, though somewhat later, c. 2600 BCE, reveals the stark social stratification that emerged. Elite tombs contained gold headdresses, musical instruments, and sacrificed attendants, while common graves held simple pottery and personal items. The small temple at Eridu grew through 17 rebuilding phases, each larger than the last, eventually evolving into a raised platform temple, the precursor to later ziggurats. At each stage, offerings of fish bones suggest continuity in worship practices devoted to Enki. Here, between these two unpredictable rivers, humanity's most consequential journey was set in motion, from bands of hunter-gatherers to builders of cities and empires. In the crucible of Mesopotamia, virtually every feature we associate with civilization emerged: writing, mathematics, astronomy, monumental architecture, kingship, organized religion, professional armies, codified law, and urban planning. The story of Mesopotamia is not merely the tale of an ancient culture. It is the story of how we became us. Sumer, birth of the city. The world's first true urban revolution unfolded in southern Mesopotamia between 4000 and 3000 BCE. On this fertile plain, the Sumerians, speaking a language unrelated to any known linguistic family, created humanity's first cities, transforming scattered agricultural villages into complex urban centers that would define civilization itself. The first cities emerge. Uruk stands as the quintessential example of this transformation. By 3200 BCE, this settlement had grown from humble origins to cover over 250 hectares, with a population reaching 50,000 residents. By 2900 BCE, a concentration of humanity unprecedented in human experience. Archaeological excavations by German teams led by Julius Jordan and later Heinrich Lenssen revealed 18 distinct occupation levels, demonstrating the city's evolution over centuries. The massive defensive wall attributed to Gilgamesh in legend required over 900,000 baked bricks for each kilometer of its 9-kilometer circuit. Within Uruk's walls, the Inanna precinct dedicated to the goddess Inanna showcased monumental architecture on a revolutionary scale. The limestone temple, constructed around 3200 BCE, required specialized labor and materials imported from distant quarries. Nearby, the pillar hall featured innovative columns made of mud bricks, architectural elements previously unknown in the region. While Uruk dominated, other city-states flourished simultaneously. Eridu, considered by Sumerians themselves as the world's oldest city, developed around the temple of Enki, god of wisdom and fresh water. Excavations at Tel Abu-Shirain revealed a sequence of 17 superimposed temples, showing the site's continuous religious significance from 5400 to 3800 BCE. A foundation deposit containing fish bones beneath the earliest shrine suggests the enduring veneration of Enki. Ur, excavated extensively by Sir Leonard Woolley in the 1920s and 1930s, rose to prominence slightly later. The city's original settlement mound covered only 10 hectares, but expanded to 50 hectares by 2600 BCE. Its ziggurat, dedicated to the moon god Nana, Sin, still stands 21 meters high, despite the passage of 4 millennia. The royal cemetery of Ur revealed extraordinary burial practices, including death pits, where dozens of attendants, musicians, soldiers, and courtiers were sacrificed to accompany elite individuals into the afterlife. Lagash, comprising the 3 separate mounds of Gursu, Lagash proper, and Nina, controlled extensive agricultural lands. Clay boundary stones marking territorial limits between Lagash and neighboring Umma document history's first recorded border dispute. The ruler Ur-Nammu commemorated his victory in this conflict on the famous Stele of the Vultures around 2450 BCE, showing soldiers in tight formation bearing copper spears and leather shields, evidence of organized military tactics. Gilgamesh. Between legend and history, the most famous Sumerian ruler, Gilgamesh of Uruk, bridges history and mythology. Archaeological evidence confirms a historical king Gilgamesh, ruling around 2700 BCE, listed as the 5th king of Uruk's first dynasty in the Sumerian king list. The epic bearing his name emerged centuries later, with the most complete version dating to approximately 2100 BCE. This remarkable literary work, inscribed on 12 clay tablets, provides profound insights into Sumerian conceptions of kingship, mortality, and the relationship between humans and gods. The story follows Gilgamesh's transformation from tyrannical ruler to wise king through his friendship with the wild man Enkidu, and their adventures fighting the monster Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven. Following Enkidu's death, Gilgamesh undertakes a quest for immortality, ultimately learning that eternal fame through great deeds offers the only enduring legacy. The epic contains elements that would echo through later literature, including a flood narrative predating the biblical account by a millennium. Tablet 1 describes how Utnapishtim survived a world-destroying deluge sent by the gods, constructing a massive boat to preserve human and animal life, a striking parallel to the later story of Noah. The structure of Sumerian society. Sumerian society developed sophisticated social stratification. At the apex stood the enigmatic figure of the En or NC, originally a priest-king whose authority derived from divine appointment. Early rulers like Meshki-Angashir of Uruk claimed descent from gods, with royal inscriptions showing them pouring libations to deities and mediating between the divine and human realms. By 2900 BCE, a more militarized kingship emerged, with the title Lugal, Great Man, signifying a ruler whose power rested on military prowess. These kings balanced religious responsibilities with practical governance, leading armies, adjudicating disputes, and commissioning public works. Below the royal elite served the priestly class who administered the temple complexes. Temple estates controlled vast agricultural lands. Archaeological surveys around Lagash indicate that temples owned approximately 2/3 of arable fields. Priests managed production, collected offerings, and maintained astronomical observations to determine proper times for planting and religious festivals. The majority of urban residents worked as specialized craftspeople: potters, weavers, metalsmiths, stone carvers, and brewers. Craft quarters at Ur reveal workshops clustered by profession, with specific techniques passed through family apprenticeships. Archaeological evidence from one Ur workshop uncovered copper-working tools, slag, and unfinished products, demonstrating the complete manufacturing process. Farmers comprised the largest segment of society, living in rural villages surrounding the cities. They cultivated barley as the principal crop, yielding 20-30 times the seed grain in good years, alongside wheat, flax, dates, and vegetables. Administrative tablets from Girsu record agricultural output with remarkable precision. One account lists 37 specific garden plots with individual yields. At the social pyramid's base existed slaves, primarily prisoners of war, criminals, or debtors. Clay tablets from Ur document slave prices ranging from 10 to 25 shekels of silver. However, Sumerian slavery differed fundamentally from later systems. Slaves maintained certain legal rights, could own property, operate businesses, and purchase their freedom. The invention of writing. Humanity's most transformative invention, writing, emerged in Uruk around 3200 BCE. The earliest clay tablets, discovered in the Iana temple complex, contain no poetry or royal proclamations, but simple economic records, accounts of grain, livestock, and labor. These first texts used pictographic symbols impressed into clay with a reed stylus, with each sign representing a concrete object: a sheep, a star, a jar of oil. Over subsequent centuries, the system evolved dramatically. By 2600 BCE, the pictographs had been rotated 90 degrees and abstracted into wedge-shaped, cuneiform impressions. The number of signs decreased from approximately 2,000 to about 600 as the system shifted from representing objects to representing sounds in the Sumerian language. This transformation allowed scribes to record abstract concepts, personal names, and eventually literature. The social impact of writing was profound. Specialized scribal schools, Kuriyaduba, emerged to train the elite in this complex system. Archaeological excavations at House F in Nippur uncovered a scribal school dating to 1740 BCE, with student tablet exercises showing multiplication tables, geometric calculations, and grammar drills. Literacy remained restricted. Perhaps only 1% of the population could read and write, creating a powerful scribal class who mediated access to knowledge. The Sumerian innovation engine beyond writing, Sumerians developed technologies that would transform human capabilities. The potter's wheel, appearing around 3500 BCE, revolutionized ceramic production. Wheel-thrown vessels from Uruk show standardized forms produced in massive quantities. Beveled rim bowls, likely used for worker rations, appear by the thousands in archaeological contexts. Metallurgy advanced rapidly from simple copper tools to sophisticated bronze alloys. By 3000 BCE, Sumerian metalsmiths had mastered the copper-tin-bronze formula, producing weapons and tools significantly harder than pure copper. The royal cemetery of Ur yielded bronze daggers with wooden handles decorated with gold studs, demonstrating both technical and artistic sophistication. In transportation, Sumerians developed both the wheel and sailboat. The earliest wheeled vehicles, four-wheeled wagons depicted on a pictographic tablet from Uruk, dated to 3200 BCE, transformed overland transport. Simultaneously, sailing vessels plied the Persian Gulf, evidenced by imported materials like lapis lazuli from Afghanistan found in Sumerian contexts. Perhaps most significantly, Sumerians developed a revolutionary mathematics system based on the number 60, a sexagesimal system whose legacy persists in our modern measurements of time and angles. Clay tablets from Shurpak, dating to 2600 BCE, contain multiplication tables, geometric calculations, and algebraic problems. The Sumerians' mathematical innovations enabled precise land surveys, architectural planning, and astronomical predictions. Irrigation engineering represented another triumph of Sumerian ingenuity. Satellite imagery and ground surveys have identified ancient canal networks extending over 100 kilometers from the Euphrates around Uruk. These canals, some up to 20 meters wide, required sophisticated understanding of hydraulics, gradient calculation, and soil mechanics. One administrative text from Ummah records 1,113 workers assigned to canal maintenance for a single season. The legacy of these innovations reverberates through history. The Sumerian achievement was not merely creating isolated cities, but establishing a pattern of urban civilization that would spread throughout the ancient world. Their technical innovations, writing, metalworking, mathematics, and architecture, laid the foundation for all subsequent Near Eastern civilizations. In the fertile plain between the rivers, humanity crossed a threshold into a new way of organizing society, one based on cities, specialization, social complexity, and technological innovation. The age of civilization had begun. Gods, myths, and power. In the shadow of ziggurats beneath the vast Mesopotamian sky, the Sumerians crafted the world's first comprehensive theological system, a cosmos populated by powerful, capricious deities who controlled every aspect of human existence. Unlike later religious traditions that would envision benevolent creator gods, Sumerian deities more closely mirrored the unpredictable environment of Mesopotamia itself, capable of tremendous bounty but equally prone to devastating fury. A universe of divine forces, the Sumerian pantheon comprised hundreds of deities organized in a complex hierarchy. At its pinnacle stood An, later called Anu, the sky god and nominal head of the pantheon. Archaeological evidence from Uruk shows his symbol, the horned crown, appearing on cylinder seals as early as 3100 BCE, though theoretically supreme, and gradually receded into remote cosmic realms, becoming less significant in daily worship. Effective leadership of the pantheon fell to Enlil, god of air and storms, whose temple at Nippur, the E-Kur or mountain house, served as Sumer's religious center for over a millennium. Excavations at Nippur by the University of Pennsylvania between 1889 and 1900 uncovered votive offerings sent by rulers from throughout Mesopotamia, demonstrating Enlil's pan-Sumerian importance. A hymn from approximately 2500 BCE addresses him as, Enlil, when you mark off heaven from earth, no god can approach you. Enki, later Ea, god of the freshwater abyss, wisdom, and crafts, maintained his temple at Eridu. Texts portray him as humanity's advocate, often intervening when other gods threatened mankind. In the Atrahasis flood story, Enki warns a righteous man about the coming deluge, providing instructions for building a boat. Archaeological evidence confirms Enki's ancient status. His shrine at Eridu shows 17 rebuilding phases dating back to 5400 BCE, making it possibly the world's oldest continuously used religious site. The goddess Inanna, later Ishtar, embodied the complexities of love, fertility, and warfare. Her temple complex at Uruk, the Eanna, or House of Heaven, was the city's centerpiece. Archaeologists have recovered thousands of votive figurines from her shrines, many depicting nude females with exaggerated sexual characteristics, reflecting her association with fertility. Yet military imagery also appears in her iconography. A hymn by the priestess Enheduanna, c. 2300 BCE, addresses her as Lady of Battles, Destroyer of Fortress Walls. Other major deities included Nana, Sin, the moon god whose cycles regulated the calendar, Utu, Shamash, the sun god who saw all and served as divine judge, and Ninhursag, the mother goddess associated with birth in the natural world. Dozens of lesser deities controlled specific domains. Nisaba governed writing and accounting, Ninkasi oversaw brewing, and Haya managed storehouses. Divine homes, temples, and ziggurats. Every Sumerian city was, in essence, the estate of its patron deity. The temple stood at both the physical and conceptual center of urban life. Archaeological investigations reveal that temples evolved from simple single-room structures in the Ubaid period to vast complexes by the early dynastic era. The ziggurat, Sumer's most distinctive architectural achievement, emerged around 2200 BCE as an artificial mountain connecting heaven and earth. The best preserved example, dedicated to Nana at Ur, rises in 3 massive terraces to a height of 21 meters. Its core consists of an estimated 720,000 baked bricks, while its exterior facing required an additional 8,400 cubic meters of fired brick set in bitumen mortar. Woolley's excavations revealed elaborate drainage systems designed to prevent rainwater from weakening the structure, evidence of sophisticated engineering knowledge. The temple proper, now lost, sat atop this immense platform, accessible only by 3 converging staircases. Within this sanctuary stood the cult statue, the deity's physical manifestation. Contemporary texts describe these statues as anthropomorphic figures crafted from precious wood, overlaid with gold and silver, dressed in elaborate garments, and adorned with jewels. Though few have survived, the Lady of Warka, a marble female head from Uruk dating to approximately 3200 BCE, suggests the sophisticated artistry devoted to divine images. Surrounding the central sanctuary, temple complexes contained administrative quarters, storehouses, workshops, kitchens, and residences for priests. The entire compound was considered sacred space, with access restricted according to purity requirements. Clay tablets from Gursu detailing temple personnel list gatekeepers, water bearers, purification priests, musicians, and numerous specialized functionaries. Daily life with the gods. For ordinary Sumerians, religious practice permeated every aspect of existence. Personal names often incorporated divine elements as protection. Names like Enlil has given life or Inanna is my strength placed individuals under specific divine patronage. Archaeological excavations of homes frequently uncover small household shrines with figurines representing protective spirits and family gods. The fundamental Sumerian belief held that humans existed solely to serve the gods, relieving divine beings of labor. This theology of service manifested in elaborate rituals designed to care for divine needs. Clay tablets from Sipar describe the daily routine. Priests awakened the god at dawn, performed purification rituals, dressed the divine statue in fresh garments, and offered meals on precious metal dishes. Excavations at various temple sites have uncovered ritual vessels, incense burners, and offering stands used in these ceremonies. Temple kitchens prepared substantial meals for the gods, evidenced by large cooking installations and animal bones showing butchery marks. After symbolic divine consumption, these offerings were redistributed to temple personnel according to rank, a practice economists recognize as an early redistributive economy. Administrative tablets meticulously record these food allocations, with higher-ranking priests receiving choice portions. Beyond these daily routines, the religious calendar included numerous festivals. The most significant was the 12-day New Year, a Kitu celebration, marking the spring equinox and agricultural renewal. During this festival, the divine statue processed through the city, reaffirming the connection between cosmic and earthly realms. The king participated in rituals symbolically renewing creation through the sacred marriage ceremony, where he symbolically united with Inanna, represented by her high priestess, to ensure fertility for the coming year. Cosmic stories, mythology, and meaning. Sumerian myths were not mere entertainment, but foundational narratives explaining cosmic realities. Several key mythological cycles illuminate Sumerian religious thought and have survived in clay tablets from various temple and palace libraries. The descent of Inanna describes the goddess's ill-fated journey to the underworld, where her sister Ereshkigal strips her of power and transforms her into a corpse hung from a hook. After 3 days, Inanna is revived but must provide a substitute, her husband Dumuzi. This myth explains seasonal death and rebirth while addressing mortality's inevitability. The Enuma Elish, though recorded later in Akkadian, incorporates earlier Sumerian cosmological concepts. It describes creation through divine conflict, with the young god Marduk, originally Enlil in Sumerian versions, defeating the primordial goddess Tiamat and using her body to create the cosmos. This narrative justified both the existing cosmic order and the political supremacy of specific cities. The Gilgamesh cycle, beyond its literary value, conveyed theological concepts about divine human relationships. Gilgamesh, despite being two-thirds divine, cannot escape death but achieves immortality through cultural achievements, specifically the walls of Uruk and written records of his deeds. The flood episode within this epic may reflect actual catastrophic flooding, evidenced in archaeological excavations at Kish and Shuruppak, where flood deposits date to approximately 2900 BCE. These myths were performed at religious festivals, transmitted orally, and eventually recorded in writing. Clay tablets from Nippur containing mythological texts show their use in scribal education, where copying these stories taught writing skills while inculcating cultural values. Divine right, kings, and cosmic order. The institution of Sumerian kingship emerged from temple administration, but evolved into a distinct power center, balancing religious and military authority. Early rulers bore the title En or Ensi, terms originally designating primary religious officials. By approximately 2900 BCE, the title Lugal, great man, appeared, reflecting kingship's increasingly martial character. The Sumerian concept of divine kingship differed from Egyptian models where pharaohs claimed divinity. Sumerian kings were human intermediaries between gods and people, appointed by divine decree but remaining mortal. The royal hymn to Shulgi of Ur, R. 2094-2047 BCE, declares, "I am a king, offspring begotten by a king and born by a queen." Royal legitimacy depended on divine selection and continued divine favor. The investiture scene on the Ur-Nammu stele shows the king receiving the rod and measuring line, symbols of just rule, directly from the god Nana. Military victory demonstrated divine support, while defeat indicated divine abandonment. When Sargon of Akkad conquered Sumer around 2334 BCE, he attributed his success to the goddess Inanna, changing the status of kingship from Sumerian cities to his capital. Kings demonstrated piety through temple construction and maintenance. Gudea of Lagash, c. 2150-2125 BCE, commemorated his rebuilding of Ningersu's temple with numerous inscriptions detailing divine dreams that guided the project and proper ritual procedures observed. Archaeological excavations confirm that temple renovation often coincided with new dynasties, physically demonstrating divine favor. The sacred marriage ceremony provided perhaps the most explicit connection between kingship and divine power. During this ritual, the king assumed the role of Dumuzi, consort of Inanna, uniting with the goddess, represented by her high priestess, in a ceremony intended to ensure agricultural fertility. A hymn from Isin describes this union. In the palace, in the night, the king approached joyfully the pure lap of Inanna. Divine economics, temples as institutions beyond their religious functions, Sumerian temples operated as major economic institutions. Archaeological surveys around Girsu reveal extensive agricultural lands belonging to temples. Administrative texts on clay tablets document these gods' estates employed thousands of workers in specialized roles: plowmen, shepherds, fishermen, and field supervisors. Temple workshops produced textiles, pottery, metalwork, and other goods. Excavations at Ur uncovered temple-associated craft areas with evidence of specialized production. The textile industry proved particularly significant. Administrative tablets record temples employing hundreds of women as weavers. One text from Ur lists rations for 221 female weavers and their 123 children attached to the temple. Temples also functioned as early banks and redistribution centers. Clay bullae, hollow clay envelopes containing tokens, from Uruk demonstrate record-keeping of goods deposited in temple storehouses. Temples provided seed grain to farmers, made loans with interest rates fixed by tradition at 33.13% for barley and 20% for silver, and stored valuables for safekeeping. This economic power gave priests significant influence within Sumerian society. The tension between temple and palace authority emerges clearly in the reforms of Uruk of Lagash, BC 2380 BCE, who specifically targeted temple corruption. The high priest came into the garden of a poor mother and took wood from it. If a funeral was performed, the priest took immense amounts of beer and grain from the estate. These reforms suggest the complex relationship between religious and royal authority. As dynastic power consolidated, royal authority gradually appropriated temple functions. By the Ur III period, 2112-2004 BCE, kings controlled temple appointments and redirected temple resources to royal projects, though maintaining the fiction of acting on the god's behalf. This shift is visible archaeologically. Palace complexes grew increasingly elaborate, while temple construction, though still impressive, received proportionally less investment. Legacy of belief. The Sumerian religious system provided not only cosmological meaning, but also the infrastructure that made complex civilization possible. Temples served as economic centers, educational institutions, and repositories of cultural knowledge. The need to track temple resources drove the development of writing, while astronomical observations for religious calendars laid the groundwork for mathematics and science. When Sumerian political power faded, their gods endured. Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians adopted and adapted the Sumerian pantheon, preserving its essential structures while translating divine names into their Semitic languages. The ziggurats they built, the hymns they sang, and the myths they recounted maintained continuity with Sumerian originals. In creating the world's first complex religious system, the Sumerians established a pattern that would influence all subsequent Near Eastern faiths. Their conception of humanity as divine servants, their priestly hierarchies, their temple-centered worship, and their mythological explanations for natural phenomena established paradigms that would echo through religious history. From this fertile theological soil, like the rich alluvium of Mesopotamia itself, would grow the religious traditions that continue to shape our world today. Wars of the city-states. The fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers created the conditions for civilization's birth, but they also set the stage for humanity's first documented wars. By 2900 BCE, southern Mesopotamia had fragmented into dozens of competing city-states, each claiming divine right to water, land, and resources that were never quite sufficient for all. The geography of conflict. The fundamental paradox of Sumerian civilization lay in its landscape. While extraordinarily fertile, the alluvial plain required irrigation to reach its potential. Archaeological surveys reveal an intricate network of canals, some extending over 50 kilometers from river to field, that demanded immense labor to construct and maintain. Control over water became the primary source of conflict between neighboring cities. Boundary stones, kuduru, excavated near the ancient cities of Lagash and Umma, document centuries of disputed territory. One limestone marker commissioned by Enmetena of Lagash around 2400 BCE proclaims, Enlil, king of all lands, father of the gods, by his righteous word marked the boundary between Ningirsu, patron deity of Lagash, and Shara, patron deity of Umma. The very need for such boundary markers indicates the contested nature of agricultural land. Surveys conducted by Robert Adams in the 1960s revealed that city-states typically controlled an area extending roughly 15 kilometers from their walls, the practical limit for daily walking to fields. Where territories overlapped, conflict became inevitable. Settlement patterns show buffer zones between major powers, with smaller villages often abandoned during periods of heightened warfare. Fortifications and arsenal archaeological evidence documents the increasing militarization of Sumerian society. City walls grew progressively more elaborate over time, with Uruk's defenses reaching 9.5 kilometers in circumference and incorporating over 900 regularly spaced towers by 2900 BCE. Recent excavations at Tel Leilan revealed walls 3 meters thick, capable of withstanding battering rams and siege engines. Weapons evolved rapidly during this period. Early copper spearheads from Ubaid Khan texts gave way to arsenals of bronze weaponry by 2500 BCE. The royal cemetery at Ur yielded copper and bronze helmets, socket axes, daggers, spears, and maces. Chemical analysis of these weapons shows incremental improvements in metallurgy. Early bronze contained 2 to 3% tin, while later examples reached 10%, significantly hardening the alloy. Artistic evidence provides insights into military organization. The famous Standard of Ur, c. 2600 BCE, depicts Sumerian soldiers in tight formation, wearing cloaks of sheepskin or leather and copper helmets, carrying spears and large rectangular shields. The uniformity of equipment suggests centralized production and organization. The bottom panel shows war chariots with solid wheels drawn by onagers, wild asses, early versions of the war vehicles that would later revolutionize ancient warfare. Lagash versus Umma, the first documented war history's first well-documented military conflict, erupted between the neighboring city-states of Lagash and Umma around 2450 BCE. At stake was control of the fertile Guadana, Edge of Eden, region between them. Clay cones discovered at Girsu containing royal inscriptions trace this conflict across multiple generations, with each city alternately gaining the upper hand. The dispute reached its climax under Eannatum of Lagash, who commissioned the famous Stele of the Vultures to commemorate his victory. This remarkable limestone monument, now in the Louvre, depicts Eannatum leading a phalanx of soldiers who advance in tight formation with overlapping shields, an early version of the tactics later perfected by Greek hoplites. The upper registers show vultures carrying away the heads of slain enemies, while the divine net of the god Ningirsu captures fleeing Umaytis. The inscription boasts that Eannatum heaped up burial mounds containing 3,600 enemy corpses, likely an exaggeration, but indicating the scale of ancient battles. Archaeological confirmation comes from mass graves discovered near Lagash, containing skeletal remains with perimortem injuries consistent with battle wounds, primarily to the skull and left side, as would be expected when facing right-handed opponents. Despite Eannatum's victory, the conflict continued. His nephew Enmatena faced renewed aggression from Umma, necessitating another military campaign. This cyclical pattern of warfare characterized Sumerian geopolitics for centuries. Temporary victories followed by renewed conflicts with no city able to establish permanent dominance. The rise of Lugal-Zagyesi. By 2350 BCE, the constant warfare had exhausted many city-states, creating conditions for broader unification. Lugal-Zagyesi, originally Ensi, ruler of Umma, embarked on a campaign of conquest that subjugated most of Sumer. A vast inscription discovered at Nippur records his claim to rule from the Lower Sea Persian Gulf along the Tigris and Euphrates to the Upper Sea Mediterranean, the first documented expression of imperial ambition in world history. Lugal-Zagyesi established his capital at Uruk and adopted the title King of the Land of Sumer and King of the Country. Archaeological evidence from this period shows destruction layers at several cities, including Lagash, where buildings were burned and abandoned during his conquests. His empire proved short-lived, however, lasting barely 25 years before facing a challenger who would transform Mesopotamian history. Sargon and the Akkadian Revolution, around 2334 BCE, a new power emerged from the north. Sargon of Akkad, whose name means the legitimate king, rose from obscure origins to create history's first true empire. According to later traditions recorded on clay tablets from Nineveh, Sargon began as a cupbearer to the king of Kish, before seizing power and establishing his own dynasty. Sargon's origins remain mysterious. He founded a new capital city, Akkad, yet to be definitively located by archaeologists, and proceeded to conquer all of Mesopotamia through a series of brilliantly executed campaigns. A fragmentary victory stele displays Sargon personally leading troops, trampling enemies underfoot, imagery that established the template for royal military propaganda for millennia to come. According to his own inscriptions, Sargon campaigned for 34 years, claiming to have conquered 34 cities and destroying their walls. Archaeological evidence confirms widespread destruction during this period, with burned layers at multiple Sumerian sites corresponding to the approximate date of Sargon's conquest. At Tel Brak in northern Syria, excavations revealed an Akkadian administrative building constructed atop a destruction layer, physical evidence of imperial expansion. The defeated Lugal-Zagasi suffered the ultimate humiliation, paraded in a neck stock to the gate of Enlil at Nippur, a powerful symbolic statement that divine favor had shifted to Sargon. Administrative tablets document how Sargon installed his daughters as high priestesses in major temples, including in Hedwana at Ur, combining religious and political control. The world's first empire. The Akkadian achievement transcended mere military conquest. Sargon created history's first multi-ethnic, multilingual empire, governed through innovative administrative systems. Excavations across Mesopotamia have uncovered standardized weights and measures, along with seals of imperial officials who oversaw taxation and resource management. Linguistically, the empire promoted Akkadian, a Semitic language distinct from Sumerian, as the administrative tongue, though Sumerian remained the language of religion and high culture. Bilingual texts from this period show the beginning of systematic translation efforts. At Tel Asmar and Tel Brak, archaeologists discovered archive rooms containing both Akkadian and Sumerian administrative documents. Artistically, the Akkadian period represents a high point in ancient Near Eastern accomplishment. The famous copper head of an Akkadian ruler, possibly Sargon or his grandson Naram-Sin, displays remarkable naturalism and technical sophistication. The victory stele of Naram-Sin, carved from pink limestone, shows the king ascending a mountain wearing the horned crown traditionally reserved for deities, a visual declaration of divine kingship that went beyond anything claimed by Sumerian rulers. Economically, the empire created unprecedented commercial networks. Clay tablets from Mari and Ebla mention Akkadian merchants, while exotic goods like lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, and copper from Oman appear throughout imperial territory. Administrative texts describe standardized taxation systems and imperial storehouses. Imperial overreach and collapse. Despite its innovations, the Akkadian Empire contained the seeds of its own destruction. Naram-Sin, R. 2254-2218 BCE, Sargon's grandson, faced widespread rebellions that a later text called the Revolt of the Four Quarters of the World. The famous cruciform monument describes these uprisings and the brutal repression that followed. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites reveals destruction layers dating to the late Akkadian period. At Tel Leilan in northern Syria, researchers discovered evidence of abandonment coinciding with a severe drought around 2200 BCE. Paleoclimatic data from Gulf of Oman sediment cores shows a 300-year aridification event beginning approximately 2200 BCE, suggesting environmental stress compounded political problems. The final blow came from beyond imperial borders. The Gutians, mountain tribes from the Zagros, exploited Akkadian weakness to raid deep into Mesopotamia. A Sumerian lament describes them as a people who know no inhibitions, with human instinct but canine intelligence and monkey features. Archaeological evidence for their presence comes from distinctive pottery styles appearing in late Akkadian contexts and destruction layers at multiple sites. A fragmentary king list records who was king, who was not king, suggesting a period of profound political instability. Agade itself was abandoned, with inscription of the last Akkadian king, Shudarul, lamenting, "In those days the dwellings of Agade were filled with misery." Sumerian Renaissance. As Gutian control weakened, a brief Sumerian Renaissance emerged under the leadership of Gudea of Lagash, c. 2144-2124 BCE. His numerous statues, carved from diorite imported from Oman, show him as a pious ruler devoted to temple reconstruction. Inscriptions describe his rebuilding of the Aninu temple for Ningirsu, employing craftsmen from the upper to the lower sea. The final resurgence of Sumerian power came with the third dynasty of Ur, founded by Ur-Nammu around 2112 BCE. His son Shulgi created a highly centralized state that scholars call the Ur-III Empire, encompassing most of Mesopotamia. Administrative texts from this period reveal a bureaucracy of unprecedented detail, recording everything from labor assignments to livestock management. This Neo-Sumerian state consciously revives Sumerian language and traditions. Archaeological evidence from Ur shows massive building projects, including the great ziggurat that still dominates the site. The density of cuneiform tablets from this period exceeds any before it, with over 100,000 administrative texts documenting the empire's operations. Yet this revival proved temporary. By 2004 BCE, a combination of Amorite incursions from the west and Elamite attacks from the east brought down the Ur-III state. The destruction of Ur itself is memorialized in the Lamentation over the Destruction of Ur, which describes the city's fall in vivid detail. Ur is destroyed, bitter is its lament. The country's blood now fills its holes like hot bronze in a mold. The legacy of conflict. The wars of the Sumerian city-states and the Akkadian Empire established patterns that would characterize Mesopotamian history for millennia. The cycle of fragmentation, conquest, imperial overreach, and collapse would repeat with the Babylonians, Assyrians, and numerous other powers. More profoundly, these conflicts transformed how humanity organized itself. The need for military manpower accelerated social stratification, with warrior elites emerging at the top of society. Defensive needs drove urbanization, with populations clustering behind protective walls. Military competition spurred technological innovation in metallurgy, architecture, and transportation. The Akkadian achievement, creating a multi-ethnic empire governed by standardized administrative systems, provided a template for later empires from Rome to China. Sargon pioneered techniques of imperial control, installing family members in key positions, standardizing weights and measures, creating an imperial ideology through art and inscriptions that subsequent empires would emulate. From the blood-soaked fields of the Guidana to the palace of Akkad, these ancient conflicts marked humanity's first experiments with organized warfare and imperial rule. The weapons have changed, but the fundamental patterns established in the land between the rivers continue to shape global politics today. The return of Sumer, Ur-Nammu dynasty. In the ruins of an empire amid the chaos left by Gutian invaders, a new Sumerian Renaissance took shape. The third dynasty of Ur, 2004 BCE, commonly called Ur, would create a centralized state of unprecedented administrative sophistication, revitalizing Sumerian culture, and embarking on an ambitious building program whose most enduring monument, the Great Ziggurat of Ur, still dominates the ancient landscape today. This brief but brilliant flowering represented Sumer's last hurrah, a final, extraordinary assertion of Sumerian identity before being absorbed into the wider cultural milieu of Mesopotamia. From chaos to order, the collapse of Akkadian imperial authority around 2200 BCE had left Mesopotamia fragmented and vulnerable. The Gutians, mountain people from the Zagros Range to the east, exploited this weakness, establishing loose control over much of the region. A Sumerian literary composition describes these invaders in unflattering terms. The Gutium, people who do not know grain, who know no inhibitions, with human instinct but canine intelligence. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals a sharp decline in urban life. Settlement surveys conducted by Robert Adams and Hans Nissen show numerous abandoned villages and reduced city populations. At Nippur, excavations uncovered a clear destruction layer followed by squatter occupations in once monumental buildings. Trade networks collapsed, demonstrated by the near absence of imported materials like lapis lazuli in Gutian period contexts. Against this backdrop of decline emerged local leaders attempting to restore order. Gudea of Lagash, c. 2140 Ma, Uto 124 BCE, known from 27 exquisitely carved diorite statues, rebuilt temples, and revived Sumerian religious practices. His inscriptions, composed in literary Sumerian, describe elaborate construction projects and religious devotion. Yet Gudea controlled only a small territory around Lagash, with limited political influence beyond. The true restoration of Sumerian power came from an unexpected quarter. Ur-Nammu, originally governor of Ur under Utu-Hegel of Uruk, seized power around 2112 BCE after his overlord's mysterious death. A stele fragment discovered at Ur shows Ur-Nammu receiving divine investiture from the moon god Nana, legitimizing his claim to rulership through religious authority. Ur-Nammu, founder and builder. Ur-Nammu, R. 2112-2095 BCE, established the foundations of the Ur-3 state through military campaigns, administrative reforms, and monumental construction. A fragmentary victory stele depicts him defeating the Gutians, thereby establishing freedom for Sumer. A propagandistic claim that nonetheless reflects the liberation from foreign domination. Administrative texts document his gradual expansion of authority, first over southern cities like Uruk and Eridu, then northward to include Nippur, Kish, and eventually most of Mesopotamia. His most visible achievement stands today at Ur itself, the great ziggurat dedicated to the moon god Nana. This massive structure, measuring 46 meters at its base and originally rising to approximately 30 meters, required millions of mud bricks. Woolley's excavations revealed sophisticated engineering features, a drainage system of bitumen-lined conduits, regularly spaced weeper holes to prevent moisture buildup, and a complex system of receding terraces. Recent analysis estimates that 720,000 baked bricks went into its construction, along with 8 million mud bricks for its core, representing approximately 50,000 person-days of labor. Ur-Nammu's building program extended beyond Ur itself. Inscriptions document temple construction at Nippur, Uruk, Eridu, and other cities. Archaeological confirmation comes from foundation deposits bearing his name, discovered beneath temples at multiple sites. This program served both religious and political purposes, demonstrating divine favor while establishing royal authority throughout the realm. Perhaps Ur-Nammu's most significant legacy was his law code, discovered on clay tablets at Nippur and dating to approximately 2100 BCE, predating Hammurabi's famous code by nearly 3 centuries. Though fragmentary, the surviving portions reveal a sophisticated legal system based on monetary compensation rather than physical retribution. One provision states, "If a man knocks out the eye of another man, he shall weigh out 1/2 a mina of silver." The prologue describes Ur-Nammu establishing justice in the land and banishing malediction, violence, and strife, framing his rule as a return to divinely sanctioned order after the chaotic Gutian period. Ur-Nammu died unexpectedly while campaigning, possibly against the Gutians. A poignant literary lament describes his body, abandoned on the battlefield like a crushed vessel, and brought back to Ur for burial, perhaps in the royal cemetery excavated by Woolley, though his tomb has not been definitively identified. Shulgi. Architect of empire, Ur-Nammu's son Shulgi, Yar 2094-2047 BCE, inherited a stable kingdom and transformed it into a tightly controlled imperial state during his remarkable 48-year reign. Inscriptions from his early years focus on temple construction and religious duties. A hymn describes him running from Nippur to Ur and back in a single day, a distance of approximately 160 kilometers, as part of a religious ritual demonstrating his superhuman capabilities. Around his 20th regnal year, Shulgi implemented revolutionary administrative reforms that would define the Ur-3 state. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites reveals standardized weights and measures, standardized tablets formats, and uniform accounting practices suddenly appearing throughout the realm. At Drahem, ancient Puzurishdagan, excavations uncovered massive archives documenting the receipt and distribution of livestock, over 100,000 animals annually, through a central state facility. Shulgi established a comprehensive road network with regularly spaced way stations, ECAS 4, approximately 30 kilometers apart, a day's journey by foot. Archaeological surveys have identified remnants of these royal roads as linear settlement patterns connecting major cities. Administrative tablets document provisions allocated to messengers and officials traveling these routes, recording specific amounts of bread, beer, and onions distributed at each station. This infrastructure enabled rapid communication across the empire and facilitated administrative control. Military campaigns extended Ur-III control into peripheral regions. Inscriptions record expeditions against the Hurrians in the north and the Amorites in the west. Archaeological evidence from sites in the Diyala region in southern Iran shows Ur-III administrative presence, with standardized weight systems and bureaucratic practices. In his 23rd year, Shulgi constructed a massive wall across central Mesopotamia, the wall that keeps the Ur-Nammu Amorites at bay, parts of which have been identified in satellite imagery. Perhaps most significantly, Shulgi revolutionized the ideological foundations of kingship by proclaiming his own divinity. After his 20th year, inscriptions show his name preceded by the divine determinative, the cuneiform sign for God. Temple hymns address him as divine, and administrative texts document offerings to statues of Shulgi in temples. This innovation, borrowing from Egyptian concepts of divine kingship while adapting them to Mesopotamian context, represented a significant departure from traditional Sumerian monarchy. The administrative state. The Ur-III period has yielded over 120,000 administrative texts, more than all other periods of Mesopotamian history combined. This extraordinary documentary record, preserved on clay tablets excavated primarily from Ur, Nippur, Umma, Girsu, and Drehem, provides unparalleled insights into the functioning of the world's first bureaucratic state. At the empire's heart stood the Bala system, a sophisticated rotation of labor and taxation obligations among provinces. Tablets from provincial centers document resources sent to the capital as ballet contributions and resources received in return. The system functioned as both taxation and redistribution mechanism. One tablet from Umma records the delivery of 800 reed bundles, 1,620 wooden posts, and 60 boats as that city's monthly Bala obligation. The administration maintained meticulous records of land ownership and agricultural production. Field surveys documented with remarkable precision the size, quality, and expected yield of agricultural land. A tablet from Girsu provides measurements accurate to 1/3600th of a hectare, along with standardized expectations of grain yields based on soil quality. The central administration used these records to calculate expected tax revenues with mathematical precision. Labor management reached unprecedented sophistication. Workers were classified into categories based on gender, age, and skill level, with standardized rations assigned accordingly. Administrative texts document work teams of women weavers receiving rations of 2 seah of bread and 5 seah of beer daily, with children receiving proportionally smaller amounts. Archaeological evidence from Ur textile workshops confirms large-scale production facilities employing hundreds of women and children. The calendar itself became standardized throughout the empire, with a 12-month lunar year and intercalary months added as needed. Cylinder seals used by officials show remarkable standardization, with specific formulaic designs indicating administrative functions. Recent research using digital imaging has identified individual seals used across multiple sites, demonstrating the movement of officials throughout the empire. The scale of this administrative apparatus required a highly trained scribal class. Excavations at House F in Nippur revealed a scribal school dating slightly after the Ur-III period, but reflecting educational practices established during this time. Student exercise tablets show multiplication tables, model contracts, and literary excerpts used for training. Administrative texts record rations allocated to scribal schools and their students, indicating state support for this critical administrative infrastructure. Cultural achievements. Beyond administrative efficiency, the Ur-III period witnessed a deliberate revival of Sumerian culture, a renaissance that some scholars interpret as a nationalist response to the previous Akkadian domination. The official state language reverted from Akkadian to Sumerian, though Akkadian continued as a spoken language. At Nippur, excavations uncovered archives containing hundreds of Sumerian literary compositions, many likely compiled or composed during this period. Royal hymns celebrated the achievements and divine status of Ur-Nammu kings. The Shulgi hymns, a collection of at least 25 compositions, describe the king's superhuman abilities, divine parentage, and extraordinary wisdom. Literary catalogs from Nippur list hundreds of compositions grouped by genre, indicating a systematic effort to collect and preserve Sumerian literary heritage. Architecture reflected the power and ambition of the dynasty. Beyond Ur-Nammu's ziggurat, archaeological excavations have revealed palace complexes at Ur featuring innovative architectural elements like columned reception halls. At Nippur, the Ekur temple complex underwent massive expansion, with a new courtyard and shrine constructed using distinctive baked bricks stamped with royal inscriptions. Artistic production flourished, particularly in relief sculpture and cylinder seals. The Ur-Nammu stele, though fragmentary, displays sophisticated composition and detailed narrative scenes arranged in registers. Cylinder seals from this period show a distinctive style with clear figures and precise details, often depicting presentation scenes where an intermediary deity leads a worshipper before a seated god. Mathematics and astronomy advanced significantly. Administrative tablets document complex calculations for area, volume, and interest on loans. The sexagesimal, base 60 number system reached full development, with place value notation allowing calculation of reciprocals and square roots. Astronomical observations recorded in later texts likely build on Ur-Nammu foundations, with the calendar system requiring sophisticated understanding of lunar phases. Imperial fragility and collapse. Despite its impressive administrative apparatus, the Ur-Nammu state contained inherent weaknesses. The highly centralized system proved vulnerable to disruption, with provincial regions maintaining distinct identities. Archaeological evidence from peripheral areas shows local traditions persisting beneath the veneer of Ur-Nammu administrative standardization. Climate change may have contributed to the empire's troubles. Paleoclimatic data from Gulf of Oman sediment cores indicates continuing aridification around 2100-2000 BCE. Settlement pattern analysis shows shrinking cultivation areas in the late Ur-Nammu period, suggesting decreasing agricultural productivity. External pressures mounted during the reign of Ibbi-Sin, ER 2028-2004 BCE, Shulgi's grandson. Administrative texts document increasing resources devoted to wall construction along the western frontier, indicating intensifying Amorite pressure. Archaeological evidence from this period shows abandoned outlying settlements and fortification of urban centers. The imperial structure began unraveling from within. A remarkable archive of letters between Ibbi-Sin and his governor, Ishbi-Era, documents the empire's disintegration. Ishbi-Era, originally sent to purchase grain from Isin during shortages, established an independent power base and eventually declared independence. Administrative texts from Isin show continuity in record-keeping practices, but with Ishbi-Era's name replacing Ibbi-Sin's in date formulas. Archaeological evidence of political revolution. The final blow came from the east. The Elamites, longtime rivals based in Highland Iran, launched a devastating attack around 2004 BCE. Archaeological evidence from Ur itself reveals a destruction layer with ash, burnt buildings, and projectile points embedded in walls. Cuneiform tablets abruptly cease, indicating administrative collapse. A Sumerian lamentation composed shortly afterward describes the catastrophe in poignant terms. Ur, its gates were breached, its walls were torn down. In its storehouses where grain was heaped high, fires burned fiercely. Archaeological confirmation comes from human remains discovered by Woolley in the streets of Ur, apparently victims of the attack, with defensive wounds consistent with warfare. Legacy of the Ur-Nammu dynasty. Though politically short-lived, the Ur-Nammu dynasty left an enduring cultural and administrative legacy. Subsequent Mesopotamian states, including Isin, Larsa, and eventually Babylon, adopted Ur-Nammu administrative techniques, legal principles, and cultural practices. Archaeological evidence from these successor states shows clear continuity in record-keeping systems, architecture, and artistic styles. The standardization of written Sumerian during this period ensured its preservation as a literary and scholarly language long after it ceased being spoken. Scribal schools maintained the Sumerian literature collected and systematized under Ur III patronage, with copies continuing to be made 1,000 years later during the Assyrian and Babylonian periods. The Epic of Gilgamesh and other literary masterpieces survive primarily thanks to this preservation effort. Ur-Nammu's law code established legal precedents that influenced subsequent Mesopotamian jurisprudence, including the more famous Code of Hammurabi. Both share similar structures, beginning with prologues establishing the king's divine mandate to establish justice before listing specific provisions organized by topic. The imperial ideology developed by Shulgi, combining divine kingship with administrative competence, provided a template for subsequent rulers throughout Mesopotamian history. Royal inscriptions of later kings, including Hammurabi of Babylon, consciously echo the language and themes of Ur III royal hymns. Perhaps most significantly, the Ur dynasty represented the last flourishing of Sumerian civilization as a distinct cultural entity. While subsequent Mesopotamian states would preserve elements of Sumerian heritage, they increasingly incorporated Semitic cultural elements from the Akkadians and Amorites. The fall of Ur marked the end of an era, the last time a major polity would identify itself primarily as the heir to Sumerian tradition. The ziggurats built by Ur-Nammu and his successors stood as silent witnesses to changing times. Some, like the Great Ziggurat of Ur, remain visible today, monuments to a civilization that pioneered urban life, complex administration, and written culture. In the meticulous clay tablets recording grain, distributions, temple offerings, and royal decrees, we glimpse the foundations of the organized state itself. From the ruins of Ur III would rise new powers, new dynasties, and new empires, but all would build upon the administrative and cultural foundations established during Sumer's final renaissance. Babylon rises from the south. From the ashes of the Ur III collapse emerged a new power that would forever change the political landscape of Mesopotamia. Rising from a relative obscurity, the city of Babylon, its name meaning Gate of the Gods, would eclipse all others under the leadership of one of history's most remarkable rulers. The ascent of Babylon represents not merely a shift in political fortunes, but a transformation of Mesopotamian civilization itself, creating patterns of kingship, law, and urban life that would endure for millennia. A city founded on foreign shores. When Babylon first appears in historical records around 2300 BCE, it exists as little more than a minor settlement along the Euphrates, its original location now lost beneath the water table, frustrating archaeological investigation. Cylinder seals from the Akkadian period mention the Gate of the God, Bab Ili, suggesting a modest shrine town of minimal political significance. The city's fortunes changed dramatically around 1894 BCE when Summuabum, an Amorite leader, seized control and established an independent dynasty. The Amorites, Semitic-speaking semi-nomadic peoples from the Syrian desert, whom the Sumerians had once disparagingly called those who do not know grain, had been infiltrating Mesopotamia for centuries. Archaeological evidence from this period shows distinctive pottery styles and burial practices reflecting Amorite influence spreading throughout the region. Summuabum's seizure of Babylon was part of a broader pattern of Amorite ascendancy following the Ur III collapse. In city after city, Amorite dynasts established control. Isin, Larsa, Eshnuna, and Mari all fell under Amorite rule. Clay tablets recovered from merchant houses in Sippar and Kish reveal Amorite personal names suddenly dominating commercial and administrative records. Settlement patterns show new small sites emerging in previously uninhabited areas, likely reflecting the sedentarization of formerly nomadic groups. For nearly a century, Babylon remained just one power among many in a fragmented political landscape. The first 5 kings of the Amorite dynasty gradually expanded their territory, building defensive walls, digging canals, and solidifying control over neighboring settlements. Archaeological surveys around Babylon reveal a 40% increase in settled area during this period, indicating growing population and prosperity. The true transformation began in 1792 BCE, when a ruler of extraordinary ambition and skill ascended the throne. Hammurabi, the Conqueror King. Hammurabi, whose name means the kinsman is a healer, was the sixth king of Babylon's first dynasty. Initially ruling a modest kingdom extending perhaps 50 kilometers from the city walls, he would eventually unite all of Mesopotamia through a combination of military genius, diplomatic cunning, and administrative innovation. Historical evidence for Hammurabi's reign comes primarily from his own royal inscriptions, administrative documents, and a remarkable archive of personal letters that reveal the king's direct involvement in governance. Over 150 letters dictated by Hammurabi himself survive, providing unprecedented insight into the mind of this ancient ruler. One letter admonishes a provincial governor. "Why have you not sent the soldiers concerning whom I wrote to you? Is not even a single soldier at your disposal? Write to me the reason for not sending them." Early in his reign, Hammurabi focused on internal development. Archaeological evidence shows extensive irrigation works from this period, with one canal named Hammurabi is the abundance of the people, extending over 100 kilometers to bring water to previously marginal lands. His inscriptions record the strengthening of city walls, construction of granaries, and restoration of temples to key deities, particularly Marduk, Babylon's patron god. For the first 30 years of his reign, Hammurabi operated within a complex multipolar political system. Cuneiform tablets from Mari, excavated by French archaeologists in the 1930s, reveal a diplomatic world of shifting alliances, royal marriages, and balance of power politics. Hammurabi maintained correspondence with other kings, exchanging gifts, intelligence, and occasionally threats. One letter from Zimri-Lim of Mari requests Hammurabi send fine oil for anointing and sweet-smelling resins, highlighting the luxury goods that cemented diplomatic relations. The geopolitical balance shifted dramatically in Hammurabi's 30th regnal year, c. 1762 BCE, when he defeated Rimsin of Larsa, who had controlled southern Mesopotamia for 60 years. Archaeological evidence from Larsa shows destruction layers followed by rebuilding with distinctive Babylonian architectural features. Administrative tablets shift abruptly from Rimsin's dating system to Hammurabi's, tangible evidence of political change. This victory unleashed a cascade of conquests. Within 5 years, Hammurabi had defeated Eshnunna to the east, Mari to the west, and Assyria to the north, uniting Mesopotamia under a single ruler for the first time since the Akkadian Empire. A year named from this period boasts the year in which Hammurabi, the king, by the command of An and Enlil, established his dominion from the lower sea to the upper sea, from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. Hammurabi's conquests were often brutal. The fate of Mari, once Babylon's ally, proved particularly harsh. After capturing the city, Hammurabi ordered its walls demolished. Archaeological excavations confirm that Mari's royal palace was systematically looted, with valuable materials removed before the structure was burned. The intensity of the fire was so great that it baked many clay tablets in the archive, ironically preserving them for modern scholars. The great lawgiver Hammurabi's most enduring legacy transcends his military conquests. Around 1754 BCE, in approximately his 38th regnal year, he commissioned what would become the ancient world's most famous legal text, the Code of Hammurabi. This remarkable document was inscribed on a 2.25-meter diorite stele, crowned with a relief showing Hammurabi receiving the rod and ring of justice from the sun god Shamash. Discovered by French archaeologists at Susa in 1901, having been carried there as plunder by Elamite invaders centuries after Hammurabi's death, the code contains 282 laws governing nearly every aspect of Babylonian society. Unlike modern legal codes designed for comprehensive coverage, Hammurabi's laws represent a collection of precedent-setting judgments, addressing specific cases that establish broader principles. The most famous aspect of the code is its principle of proportional retribution, lex talionis, or an eye for an eye, exemplified in provisions like, if a man destroy the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye. If he break a man's bone, they shall break his bone. This principle, later echoed in biblical law, established that punishment should mirror the crime, a concept revolutionary in its systematic application. The code reveals a society with clear social stratification. Penalties varied dramatically based on the social status of perpetrator and victim. Injuries to a Welam, free citizens, carried heavier penalties than identical injuries to Mushkinam, dependent commoners, while harming wardom, slaves, generally required only financial compensation to the owner. One law states, if a man knock out the teeth of his equal, his teeth shall be knocked out. If he knock out the teeth of a commoner, he shall pay 1/3 mina of silver. Despite these inequalities, the code also includes provisions protecting vulnerable groups. Widows receive special consideration. A woman whose husband has died shall not leave her house if her husband did not leave her anything. If her husband made her a gift, she shall take her gift and whatever her husband gave her in writing. She may dwell in her husband's house and enjoy it as long as she lives. Archaeological evidence from Sippar reveals widow-maintained households continuing for decades after a husband's death. Confirming these protections had practical effect. The code regulated commerce with striking sophistication. Provisions governed interest rates, agricultural tenancy, professional liability, and product quality. One law states, if a merchant lend grain at interest, he shall receive 60 gur of grain per gur as interest. If he lend money at interest, he shall receive 1/6 of a shekel and 6 grains per shekel as interest. Archaeological evidence confirms these exact rates in loan contracts preserved on clay tablets. Hammurabi's prologue and epilogue reveal the ideological significance of the code. He describes himself as the shepherd of the people, who ensures that the strong might not oppress the weak, to give justice to the orphan and widow. The law code thus served as both practical governance and royal propaganda, demonstrating Hammurabi's fulfillment of the divine mandate to establish justice. Beyond the monumental stele, archaeological evidence confirms the code's practical application. Legal tablets from Sippar, Babylon, and Larsa show judges citing specific provisions in actual court cases. Contracts incorporate its principles, and administrative documents reference its standards for wages and obligations. The code represented not merely aspirational ideals, but functioning law that shaped daily life throughout the empire. Engineering a new capital under Hammurabi's direction, Babylon transformed from a modest city into the metropolis that would dazzle the ancient world for centuries to come. Though later construction and the high water table have limited archaeological investigation of Hammurabi's Babylon, textual evidence and excavations at contemporary sites provide insights into the city's development. The king invested heavily in Babylon's defenses. Royal inscriptions describe a massive double wall system surrounding the city, with the outer wall named Babylon is the beloved of Marduk, and the inner wall called May Marduk cause Babylon to rejoice. German excavations in the early 20th century uncovered portions of these walls, revealing mud brick construction over 9 meters thick, with regularly spaced towers and monumental gates. The street plan implemented by Hammurabi established patterns that would define Babylon for a millennium. Administrative texts mention the processional way, a grand avenue leading from the Ishtar Gate to the temple complex of Marduk. Hydraulic engineering ensured effective drainage, with a sophisticated network of clay pipes discovered beneath street levels dating to this period. At the heart of Hammurabi's capital stood the Esagila complex, the Temple of Marduk and its attached ziggurat. Though later rebuilt multiple times, inscriptions confirm that Hammurabi substantially enlarged these structures, elevating Marduk from a relatively minor deity to the head of the pantheon. This theological innovation paralleled Babylon's political rise. As the city became Mesopotamia's capital, its god assumed primacy among the deities. Royal inscriptions boast of Hammurabi importing cedars from Lebanon, gold from distant lands, and lapis lazuli from Afghanistan to adorn the temple. Archaeological evidence confirms increasing quantities of imported luxury goods in Babylonian context during this period. Analysis of botanical remains shows new exotic plants appearing in gardens, while faunal remains indicate greater dietary diversity, all markers of growing wealth and cosmopolitanism. The administration of Empire Hammurabi's conquests created governance challenges that required innovative administrative solutions. Unlike the Ur-Nammu state, with its standard provincial system, Hammurabi maintained local governance structures while establishing overarching imperial control. Administrative texts reveal a complex hierarchy of officials, from city governors, shapirim, to district managers, Rabbianim, to village headmen, Sugagom. The survival of approximately 150 letters from Hammurabi to his officials provides unprecedented insight into imperial administration. These letters show the king personally intervening in matters ranging from irrigation disputes to military deployments to temple appointments. One letter instructs an official, examine the tablet with the list of soldiers who have been assigned to Babylon. If one of the soldiers does not show up for duty within 10 days, confiscate his field and garden. Archaeological evidence confirms standardization across the empire. Uniform weights and measures appear throughout Babylonian territory. Administrative documents follow consistent formats, suggesting centralized scribal training. Royal iconography shows remarkable consistency from north to south, with cylinder seals depicting standardized presentation scenes before seated deities. Religious policy played a crucial role in imperial integration. Hammurabi's inscriptions claim he returned to their places the gods of Sumer and Akkad, restoring cults disrupted during earlier conflicts. Archaeological evidence shows temple renovations throughout conquered territories, often incorporating distinctly Babylonian architectural elements. This religious restoration served both piety and politics, legitimizing Hammurabi's rule while binding conquered territories to the imperial center. Economic integration accompanied political unification. Administrative texts document standardized taxation rates across the empire. Commercial contracts show Babylonian merchants operating throughout Mesopotamia with consistent legal protections. The empire maintained strategic control of key trade routes, with customs posts established at border crossings and river junctions. Analysis of pottery distribution reveals increasingly homogenized styles throughout the empire. Archaeological evidence of cultural and economic integration. Legacy of the lawgiver Hammurabi died around 1750 BCE after a 43-year reign that transformed Mesopotamian history. His immediate successors struggled to maintain the vast empire he had created. His son Samsu-Iluna faced widespread rebellions, losing control of southern Mesopotamia to the emerging Sealand dynasty. Archaeological evidence shows abandonment of numerous southern cities during this period, with population shifting northward. Climate change may have contributed to this decline, with paleo-environmental data indicating decreased rainfall and agricultural productivity. Despite these setbacks, Hammurabi's legacy endured far beyond his dynasty's political fortunes. Babylon remained Mesopotamia's cultural and intellectual center for over 1,000 years. The Babylonian language, a dialect of Akkadian codified during Hammurabi's reign, became the international diplomatic language of the ancient Near East, used in correspondence between Egypt, Hatti, Mitanni, and Assyria for centuries. Hammurabi's law code established legal principles that influenced subsequent Mesopotamian legislation, including Middle Assyrian, Neo-Babylonian, and possibly even biblical law. His empire created an enduring concept of Mesopotamian unity that later rulers like Nebuchadnezzar would strive to recreate. The centrality of Marduk in the pantheon, established by Hammurabi, would persist through the end of Mesopotamian civilization itself. Archaeological evidence confirms Hammurabi's continuing prestige. Scribes copied his inscriptions and letters as school exercises for a millennium after his death. His name appears in Babylonian king lists as an exemplary ruler. The library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, dating to the 7th century BCE, over 1,000 years after Hammurabi, contained copies of his correspondence and legal decisions, studied by Assyrian scholars seeking wisdom from the past. Hammurabi transformed not just the politics, but the very concept of kingship in Mesopotamia. His self-presentation as warrior, builder, lawgiver, and shepherd established an ideal that subsequent rulers would emulate. From a minor Amorite dynast ruling a provincial city, he had created an empire and a legacy that would echo through history, elevating Babylon from obscurity to the center of the civilized world. The city he elevated would rise and fall repeatedly in subsequent centuries, but it would never again be insignificant. From its humble origins, Babylon had become what its name proclaimed, truly the gate of the gods, the axis around which Mesopotamian civilization would revolve for over a millennium to come. Babylonian splendor and science. In the shadow of Hammurabi's empire, as political fortunes rose and fell, Babylon established itself as something far more enduring than a mere seat of power. The city became Mesopotamia's intellectual heart, a center of learning, innovation, and cultural achievement that would influence civilizations for millennia to come. While kings and dynasties proved ephemeral, Babylonian knowledge, encoded in thousands of clay tablets, would outlast empires and continue to shape our world today. The mathematical mind of Babylon. The Babylonians inherited the Sumerian sexagesimal, base 60 number system, but developed it to unprecedented levels of sophistication. Archaeological evidence for this mathematical revolution comes primarily from clay tablets discovered at sites throughout Mesopotamia. At Nippur, excavations uncovered a scribal school with hundreds of mathematical texts dating from the Old Babylonian period, CC, 1900, 1600 BCE. These include multiplication tables, reciprocal tables, and problem texts demonstrating advanced computational techniques. The famous Plimpton 322 tablet, dating to approximately 1800 BCE, contains a sophisticated table of Pythagorean triples, right triangles with whole number sides, calculated with remarkable precision. Recent analysis suggests this represents the world's earliest trigonometric table, predating Greek achievements by over a millennium. The tablet demonstrates not merely practical calculation, but abstract mathematical thinking, with numbers arranged to reveal underlying patterns. Babylonian mathematicians developed algebraic methods for solving quadratic equations. A tablet from Tel Har-Mal, ancient Shadupam, provides step-by-step instructions. I have added the area in 2/3 of my side of the square, and it is 0.35. You take 1, the coefficient. 2/3 of 1 is 0.40, half of 0.40 is 0.20. You multiply 0.20 by 0.20, which gives 0.640. You add 0.640 to 0.35, which gives 0.41, The square root of 0.41, is 0.50. You add 0.20 to 0.50, which gives 1.10. This is the side of the square. This solution method using completion of squares anticipates techniques rediscovered in Renaissance Europe. Archaeological evidence confirms the practical application of this mathematical knowledge. Surveying tools discovered at multiple sites include measuring ropes with knots at regular intervals and bronze angle measures. Administrative texts record precise field measurements calculated to tiny fractions of area units. Architectural remains demonstrate sophisticated understanding of proportion, with the dimensions of temples and palaces often conforming to simple numerical ratios. The Babylonian approach to mathematics differed fundamentally from later Greek traditions. While Greeks emphasized geometric proof and abstract reasoning, Babylonians focused on algorithmic methods and computational techniques. Their mathematics was deeply practical, developed to solve real-world problems in commerce, land management, and construction. Yet this pragmatic approach produced insights of remarkable depth and lasting value. Mapping the heavens, Babylonian astronomy represents one of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements. Systematic celestial observation began in the Old Babylonian period, but reached its zenith during the later Neo-Babylonian and Persian eras, 7th or 4th centuries BCE. Archaeological evidence comes from thousands of astronomical tablets discovered primarily at Babylon, Uruk, and Sippar. The Em-Ulapan tablets, compiled around 700 BCE but incorporating much older material, contain the earliest comprehensive star catalog, listing 71 stars and constellations organized into 3 paths across the sky. Excavations at the Temple of Shamash in Sippar uncovered astronomical diaries recording daily observations of planetary positions, weather conditions, and market prices, some spanning decades of continuous observation. By the 7th century BCE, Babylonian astronomers had identified the 18.6-year cycle of lunar nodes, the points where the moon's orbit intersects the ecliptic, allowing them to predict eclipses with remarkable accuracy. The Saros cycle of 223 lunar months, approximately 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours, between successive similar eclipses was fully understood and documented on clay tablets found in the library of Eshurbanipal at Nineveh. Babylonian planetary theory reached extraordinary sophistication. Late Babylonian astronomical tablets, c. 450 BCE, demonstrate mathematical models for predicting planetary positions using arithmetic progressions and step functions. These computational methods achieved accuracy comparable to Ptolemy's later geocentric model, but without its geometric framework. The tablets show calculations for first and last visibility, stationary points, and retrograde motion of planets, all critical for both practical calendar making and astrological interpretation. Observational tools remained relatively simple. Archaeological evidence suggests Babylonian astronomers used water clocks for timing, vertical gnomons for measuring shadows, and sighting tubes for aligning with celestial objects. The true power of their astronomy lay not in instrumentation, but in systematic record-keeping over centuries, allowing the identification of complex celestial cycles. This astronomical knowledge served both practical and religious purposes. Calendar regulation required precise understanding of lunar phases, while temple rituals needed to be performed at astronomically determined auspicious times. Administrative texts from temples record rations for astronomical observers, indicating institutional support for this specialized knowledge. The scribal tradition, education and knowledge. The intellectual achievements of Babylon rested on a sophisticated educational system centered on the Aduba, tablet house, or scribal school. Archaeological evidence for these institutions comes from several sites, most notably House F at Nippur, a two-story building organized around a central courtyard with multiple rooms for instruction. Excavations yielded over 1,500 tablets, including student exercises, curricular texts, and literary compositions. The scribal curriculum followed a standardized progression. Beginning students practiced simple wedges and signs on round or lentil-shaped tablets, many of which bear the impressions of instructors correcting fingers. Intermediate exercises included copying standard word lists organized by category: trees, animals, stones, geographical names. Advanced students tackled mathematical problems, legal formulations, and literary compositions. The entire training process typically required 8 to 12 years of study. Archaeological evidence confirms the social context of scribal education. Most students came from elite families, with some tablets bearing colophons identifying students as sons of priests, officials, or merchants. Female scribes appear occasionally in administrative records, though they remained a small minority. Excavated tablets include both school exercises and teachers' model texts, sometimes with corrections and annotations. The curriculum extended far beyond mere technical writing skills. Students absorbed a comprehensive worldview through the texts they copied. Mathematical exercises taught not just calculation, but problem-solving approaches. Legal texts inculcated principles of justice and social order. Literary compositions transmitted cultural values and religious concepts. Through this education, scribes became not merely recorders, but custodians of Mesopotamian civilization itself. By the first millennium BCE, scribal specialization had developed into distinct scholarly disciplines. Texts from Neo-Babylonian Uruk mention 5 categories of experts: a shipu, exorcist, healer; baru, diviner; kalu, lamentation priest; asu, physician; and tupsharu, astrologer, astronomer. Archaeological evidence for this specialization comes from libraries with texts grouped by discipline, specialized tools associated with particular professions, and administrative records listing experts by category. Medicine. Between science and magic. Babylonian medicine represented a sophisticated blend of empirical observation and religious interpretation. Medical texts discovered at Nippur, Assur, and Sultan Tepe reveal a detailed understanding of anatomy, symptomatology, and treatment options. The most comprehensive collection, the Diagnostic Handbook, compiled Ceda's 11th century BCE but incorporating much older material, contains over 3,000 symptom descriptions organized from head to foot, with prognoses and treatment recommendations. Archaeological evidence for medical practice includes surgical instruments excavated from several sites. Copper and bronze scalpels, forceps, and probes show sophisticated design and specialized function. Chemical analysis of residues in pottery vessels has identified medicinal compounds containing willow bark, containing salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin; thyme, a natural antiseptic; and poppy, containing opiates for pain relief. Babylonian physicians recognized the distinction between physical and psychological ailments, though both were understood within a religious framework. A text from Sippar states, If a man's face is continually sad, and he can neither eat bread nor drink beer, that man suffers from depression, a nisitu. An evil spirit has entered him. Treatment combined physical remedies, herbs, poultices, dietary changes, with spiritual interventions, incantations, rituals, amulets. The medical profession operated within a legal framework established by Hammurabi's Code, which specified fees and penalties for physicians. Archaeological evidence confirms these provisions were not merely theoretical. Legal tablets from Babylon record cases of malpractice claims and compensation payments. One tablet documents a physician named Shamash Idin being paid 2 shekels of silver for successfully treating an eye infection, precisely the fee specified in Hammurabi's Code. Babylonian understanding of disease causation recognized multiple factors. Some illnesses were attributed to divine punishment for moral transgressions, others to attacks by demons or witchcraft, and still others to natural causes like contaminated food or water. This multifactorial approach led to comprehensive treatment strategies addressing physical, psychological, and spiritual dimensions simultaneously. Libraries preserving knowledge. The intellectual achievements of Babylon were preserved in libraries, collections of tablets organized by subject and maintained by institutional support. Archaeological evidence for these libraries comes from several sites, with the most significant discoveries at Nippur, Sippar, and Babylon itself. The temple library at Sippar, excavated in 1986, contained over 800 tablets carefully arranged on wooden shelves that had long since decayed, leaving the tablets in neat rows within the collapsed debris. Analysis of the collection revealed texts on astronomy, mathematics, medicine, divination, and ritual, many bearing colophons identifying the scribes who copied them and the originals from which they were derived. Libraries employed sophisticated cataloging systems. A tablet from Assur lists text by incipit, first line, with organizational categories including wisdom, rituals, medical, and mathematical. Physical evidence for cataloging includes small clay tags attached to tablet containers, inscribed with content summaries. Some libraries use specialized storage containers. Excavations at Sippar uncovered clay tablet boxes with labels indicating contents. The preservation of knowledge extended beyond passive storage to active transmission. Colophons on tablets often include statements like copied according to its original and collated, or damaged in its original, uncertain reading. Archaeological evidence for this scholarly activity includes tablets with multiple hands visible in the script, suggesting collaborative checking and correction. Some tablets bear annotations in smaller script between lines or in margins, indicating ongoing engagement with the text. Library collections reveal the cosmopolitan nature of Babylonian scholarship. Texts in multiple languages, Sumerian, Akkadian, and occasionally other tongues, demonstrate intellectual exchange across cultural boundaries. Bilingual vocabularies and grammatical texts show active efforts to maintain access to older traditions. Some tablets bear notations indicating they were copied from originals in distant cities, evidence of scholarly networks spanning Mesopotamia. The cosmic city, religion, and mythology. Babylon's intellectual achievements were inseparable from its religious worldview. The city's patron deity, Marduk, rose from relative obscurity to become head of the pantheon, a theological transformation paralleling Babylon's political ascendancy. Archaeological evidence for Marduk's cult centers on the Esagila temple complex, excavated by German archaeologists in the early 20th century. The massive structure, measuring approximately 86-78 meters, contained multiple shrines, courtyards, and the sacred chamber, Papahu, housing Marduk's cult statue. The Babylonian creation epic, Enuma Elish, composed during the late 2nd millennium BCE, established Marduk's cosmic supremacy through his defeat of the primordial goddess Tiamat. Archaeological evidence for this text comes from multiple fragmentary tablets discovered at Assur, Kish, and Sultan Tepe, with the most complete version from the library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh. The epic was recited during the New Year, Akitu festival, when the king ritually renewed Marduk's cosmic victory. Astronomical knowledge intertwined with religious practice. Temples contain special chambers for celestial observation, with some structures oriented to significant astronomical alignments. The ziggurat of Babylon, known as Etemenanki, House of the Foundation of Heaven and Earth, rose in 7 stages corresponding to the 7 known celestial bodies. Though later rebuilt by Nebuchadnezzar II, inscriptions confirm its existence in the Old Babylonian period. This massive structure, likely the inspiration for the biblical Tower of Babel, stood approximately 91 meters tall, according to ancient descriptions. Archaeological excavations revealed only its foundations, measuring 91 x 91 meters, as the superstructure was dismantled for building materials in later periods. Reconstructions based on archaeological evidence and textual descriptions suggest a stepped pyramid with a shrine at the summit, accessed by 3 converging staircases. Religious rituals incorporated sophisticated astronomical knowledge. The timing of festivals depended on precise observation of lunar phases and equinoxes. Ritual texts specify celestial conditions required for particular ceremonies. When the moon is visible on the 14th day and stands opposite the sun, you shall perform the ritual of Shamash. Archaeological evidence for these practices includes specialized calendrical texts and ritual implements discovered in temple contexts. The Ishtar Gate. Artistic achievement. Babylonian intellectual achievements were matched by artistic and architectural innovation. Though the most spectacular monuments date from the Neo-Babylonian period, 626 to 539 BCE, archaeological evidence confirms artistic traditions established during the Old Babylonian era. Cylinder seals from this period show increasingly naturalistic rendering of human and animal figures, with complex compositional arrangements replacing earlier, more static designs. The artistic apex of Babylon is exemplified by the Ishtar Gate, constructed by Nebuchadnezzar II around 575 BCE but incorporating artistic traditions developed over centuries. German excavations led by Robert Koldewey between 1899 and 1917 uncovered this monumental structure, which formed the northern entrance to the city. The gate featured walls of deep blue glazed bricks adorned with relief images of lions, bulls, and the Mushushu dragon, symbol of Marduk. Chemical analysis of the glazed bricks reveals sophisticated understanding of mineral compounds and firing techniques. The distinctive blue derived from copper compounds required precise temperature control during firing, evidence of specialized knowledge transmitted through generations of craftsmen. The relief figures were created using molded bricks, with each animal composed of multiple pieces fitted together with remarkable precision. The processional way leading to the Ishtar Gate stretched over 250 meters, its walls lined with glazed brick reliefs of 120 lions in striding poses, symbols of Ishtar, goddess of war. Archaeological evidence confirms this avenue was paved with limestone and red breccia stones, each inscribed with Nebuchadnezzar's dedication. I, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, son of Nabopolassar, king of Babylon, paved this street with mountain stone for the procession of the great Lord Marduk. Legacy of learning. The intellectual legacy of Babylon extended far beyond Mesopotamia itself. When the Persian king Cyrus captured Babylon in 539 BCE, he adopted many aspects of Babylonian administrative and scholarly tradition. Archaeological evidence from Persepolis shows Babylonian scribes employed in the Persian bureaucracy, identifiable through distinctive writing styles and naming patterns. Greek scholars like Berossus, a Babylonian priest writing in Greek during the Hellenistic period, transmitted Mesopotamian knowledge to the Mediterranean world. Fragments of his work preserved in later authors describe Babylonian history, religion, and astronomy. Archaeological evidence for this cultural transmission includes Greek astronomical texts showing clear Babylonian influence in their computational methods and parameters. Jewish scholars, exiled to Babylon after the destruction of Jerusalem in 587 BCE, absorbed Babylonian intellectual traditions. The Babylonian Talmud, compiled centuries later, contains astronomical, mathematical, and medical knowledge derived from Mesopotamian sources. Archaeological evidence for Jewish communities in Babylon includes distinctive burial practices and household items discovered in several neighborhoods of the city. Perhaps most remarkably, elements of Babylonian knowledge remain embedded in our daily lives. Our 60-minute hours, 60-second minutes, and 360-degree circles derive directly from the Babylonian sexagesimal system. The 7-day week, with its pattern of 6 days of work followed by a rest day, has roots in Babylonian astronomical and religious concepts. Even the 12 signs of the zodiac, still referenced in modern horoscopes, originated with Babylonian astronomers who divided the ecliptic into 12 equal segments around 500 BCE. The intellectual achievements of Babylon demonstrate the cumulative power of systematic observation, record-keeping, and institutional knowledge transmission. Without telescopes, calculus, or computers, Babylonian scholars achieved remarkable insights through patient observation, meticulous documentation, and mathematical ingenuity. Their legacy reminds us that the foundations of science lie not in technological sophistication, but in the disciplined application of human curiosity to understanding the patterns of our world. From the mathematical tablets of old Babylonian scribal schools to the astronomical diaries of Hellenistic scholars, the intellectual tradition of Babylon represents one of humanity's greatest achievements, a testament to the power of human reason to discern order in the apparent chaos of experience. In the words of a Babylonian astronomical text, to observe the stars of the sky is to understand the intentions of the gods. In their quest to understand the heavens, the scholars of Babylon helped lay the foundations for humanity's ongoing effort to comprehend our place in the cosmos. Fall and legacy. All empires rise, and all empires fall. This cycle, so familiar to students of history, first played out in the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, where humanity's earliest experiments with imperial power revealed patterns that would repeat throughout subsequent millennia. The decline of Babylon after Hammurabi's death and the remarkable resilience of Mesopotamian civilization through successive waves of conquerors offers profound insights into the nature of political power and cultural endurance. The unraveling of Hammurabi's empire. Hammurabi's death around 1750 BCE left his son Samsu-Iluna, r. 1749-1712 BCE, an inheritance both magnificent and precarious. Administrative texts from the early years of Samsu-Iluna's reign show initial continuity, with the same bureaucratic systems and provincial governors remaining in place. Yet within 5 years, troubling signs appeared. Archaeological evidence reveals the first cracks in imperial control. In southern Mesopotamia, settlement patterns show dramatic population decline. Surveys conducted by Robert Adams and Hans Nissen documented abandonment of numerous sites dating precisely to this period. Ur's inhabited area shrank by nearly 40%, while Larsa and Nippur show evidence of partial abandonment. The immediate catalyst for this decline came from the far south. A rebel leader named Rim-Sin II, claiming the name of Larsa's earlier king, seized control of several southern cities. Archival tablets from Nippur abruptly switched date formulas from Samsu-Iluna's regnal years to Rim-Sin II's, archaeological evidence of political revolution. Though Samsu-Iluna eventually defeated this rebellion, texts describe him destroying the walls of resistant cities, indicating punitive devastation. More ominously, environmental factors undermined Babylonian power. Paleoclimatic evidence from Gulf of Oman sediment cores indicates decreasing rainfall during this period. Analysis of canal sedimentation shows salinization of agricultural fields, particularly in the south. Text records from Larsa and Ur document declining harvest yields, with some fields producing less than half their previous output. These environmental challenges triggered a northward population shift visible in settlement pattern data, with southern cities declining as central Mesopotamian settlements expanded. External threats compounded these internal challenges. During Samsu-Iluna's 9th regnal year, the Kassites, a people from the Zagros Mountains, launched their first raids into Mesopotamia. Though initially repelled, their presence would become a persistent menace. More immediately dangerous were the Sealan rulers, who established an independent dynasty controlling the southernmost regions. Archaeological evidence for this fragmentation includes defensive walls constructed at previously unfortified sites and caches of valuable goods buried beneath house floors, signs of increasing insecurity. Samsu-Iluna's successors fought a losing battle against these centrifugal forces. Abiashu, r. 1711-1684 BCE, campaigned repeatedly against the Sealand, apparently without decisive success. Amidatana, R. 1683-1647 BCE, and Amisaduqa, R. 1646-1626 BCE, maintained control over a shrinking territory, with administrative texts showing increasingly limited geographic scope. The final blow came during the reign of Samsu-Ditana, ER 1695-1595 BCE, when the Hittite king Mursili-Lamar launched a daring raid from Anatolia, sacking Babylon itself before withdrawing with substantial plunder. Archaeological evidence from Babylon shows a destruction layer dating to approximately 15985 BCE, with burned buildings and scattered weapons. The fate of Samsu-Ditana remains unknown, but with his fall, the dynasty founded by Hammurabi's ancestor Sumuabum came to an ignominious end after 3 centuries of rule, the Kassite interregnum. In the aftermath of the Hittite raid, the Kassites, previously a peripheral threat, seized their opportunity. Under their king Agum II, they occupied Babylon around 1570 BCE, establishing what would become Mesopotamia's longest ruling dynasty. For nearly 4 centuries, c. 1570 to 1155 BCE, these former mountain nomads would preserve and transmit Babylonian civilization through a period of profound geopolitical change. Archaeological evidence for the Kassite period reveals both continuity and adaptation. Pottery styles show gradual evolution rather than abrupt change, suggesting assimilation rather than displacement of the local population. Religious architecture maintained traditional Babylonian forms, with excavations at Dur-Kurgal-Su, modern Kharkov, revealing a classic Mesopotamian ziggurat and temple complex. Administrative texts continue using the Akkadian language and cuneiform script, with only minor modifications to the writing system. The most distinctive Kassite innovation appears in their boundary stones, kuduru. These carved limestone monuments record royal land grants, combining legal text with religious imagery. The Kuduru, dating to the reign of Natsi Marutush, c. 1307-1282 BCE, depicts divine symbols protecting the property boundaries, while inscriptions detail the precise dimensions of the granted land and curse anyone who would violate these rights. These monuments represent a legal innovation addressing the need to secure property rights during a period of political transition. Kassite rule witnessed significant economic development. Archaeological evidence from Nippur and Ur shows rebuilding of infrastructure damaged during the late Old Babylonian period. Administrative texts document standardized field surveys, systematic tax collection, and extensive temple estates. International trade flourished, with Kassite period Babylonian goods appearing in archaeological contexts throughout the eastern Mediterranean and Iran. The famous Amarna letters, diplomatic correspondence between Egypt and various Near Eastern powers, include tablets from the Kassite king Bernaburish to Nunasis c. 1333 BCE, addressing the Egyptian pharaoh as brother and equal. This period of relative stability enabled cultural consolidation. Scribal activity flourished, with major efforts to collect, copy, and systematize earlier texts. The standardized version of the Gilgamesh epic, incorporating earlier Sumerian tales into a unified Akkadian narrative, reached its near-final form during this period. Astronomical observation continued developing, with texts documenting eclipses and planetary movements according to standardized terminology that would remain in use for a millennium. The Kassite achievement lay primarily in preservation rather than innovation. During a time of upheaval across the Near East, including the rise and fall of the Mitanni kingdom, the expansion of the Hittite Empire, and the Egyptian New Kingdom's imperial adventures, they maintained Babylonian cultural traditions and political institutions, allowing the legacy of earlier periods to survive. Their political fortunes declined in the 13th and 12th centuries BCE amid the broader disruptions of the Late Bronze Age collapse. A series of conflicts with Assyria to the north and Elam to the east gradually weakened Kassite power. The final blow came around 1155 BCE when the Elamite king Shutruk-Nahunte sacked Babylon, carrying off numerous monuments including Hammurabi's famous law code Stele, explaining its discovery by French archaeologists at Susa, the Elamite capital. Age of Iron and Empire. The fall of the Kassites inaugurated a period of political fragmentation in Babylon. Archaeological evidence shows multiple destruction layers dating between 1200 to 900 BCE, with associated changes in pottery styles and settlement patterns indicating population movements and political instability. This instability reflected broader patterns across the Near East during the collapse of the Late Bronze Age international system. The power vacuum eventually allowed the rise of Assyria, whose archaeological signature appears across northern Mesopotamia from the 9th century BCE onward. Distinctive palace architecture, standardized imperial art, and administrative archives document Assyria's emergence as the ancient world's first true military empire. The Neo-Assyrian kings eventually conquered Babylon, with Tiglath-Pileser III, R745-727 BCE, and his successors incorporating it into their expanding empire. Assyrian treatment of Babylon varied dramatically. Some kings, like Sennacherib, EOR 705-681 BCE, responded to Babylonian rebellions with extraordinary brutality. In 689 BCE, after suppressing yet another uprising, Sennacherib's troops destroyed the city, diverting the Euphrates to flood its ruins. Archaeological evidence confirms this destruction through a thick layer of silt and debris dating to this period. Sennacherib's own inscriptions boast, "I destroyed it more thoroughly than a flood, that in days to come the site of that city and its temples would not be remembered. I devastated it with water and made it like inundated grassland." Other Assyrian rulers took precisely the opposite approach. Sennacherib's son, Esarhaddon, R681-669 BCE, ordered Babylon's reconstruction, describing himself in inscriptions as the city's divinely appointed restorer. Archaeological evidence shows massive rebuilding projects dating to his reign, with distinctive Assyrian architectural features incorporated into traditional Babylonian temple designs. This reconstruction reflected the profound cultural prestige Babylon maintained even in defeat. The final reversal of fortune came with stunning rapidity. In 626 BCE, a Chaldean leader named Nabopolassar, ER 626-605 BCE, drove the Assyrians from Babylon and established independence. As Assyrian power collapsed under combined pressure from the Medes, Scythians, and Babylonians, a new Neo-Babylonian empire emerged. Within 2 decades, Assyria's vast empire had disintegrated, and Babylon once again controlled Mesopotamia. Under Nabopolassar's son, Nebuchadnezzar II, R605-562 BCE, Babylon reached its apex of power and splendor. Archaeological excavations reveal the city's massive expansion during this period, with the urban area tripling in size to approximately 900 hectares. The famous Ishtar Gate, now reconstructed in Berlin's Pergamon Museum, exemplifies the artistic achievements of this period. Chemical analysis of its glazed blue bricks reveals sophisticated understanding of mineral compounds and firing techniques, while the relief animals display masterful naturalistic style. Nebuchadnezzar's inscriptions claim he used cedars from Lebanon, gold, silver, and precious stones from across the world in his building projects. Archaeological confirmation comes from elemental analysis, showing Lebanese cedar in roof beams, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan in decorative elements, and gold with trace elements matching Egyptian sources. The Neo-Babylonian Empire's overextension proved its undoing. After expensive but inconclusive wars against Egypt, the empire's internal cohesion weakened. The last king, Nabonidus, Yar 556-539 BCE, spent years in the Arabian oasis of Tema, according to both his own inscriptions and archaeological evidence from that site. His religious innovations, elevating the moon god Sin above Marduk, alienated the powerful Babylonian priesthood. These internal divisions left Babylon vulnerable when a new power appeared from the east. In 539 BCE, the Persian king Cyrus the Great captured Babylon with minimal resistance. The famous Cyrus cylinder, discovered during 19th century excavations, describes the Persian king as a liberator welcomed by Marduk himself. Marduk, scanned and looked through all the countries, searching for a righteous ruler willing to lead him. He pronounced the name of Cyrus, king of Anshan, declared him to be ruler of all the world. Archaeological evidence confirms a relatively peaceful transition, with no significant destruction layer associated with the Persian conquest. Administrative continuity appears in texts showing the same officials continuing in office under new masters. Babylon would remain an important provincial capital within the Persian Empire, later passing to Alexander the Great and his successors, before gradually declining in significance during the Parthian period. The enduring legacy. The true measure of Mesopotamian civilization lies not in the longevity of its empires, but in its profound and lasting influence on human development. This legacy extends across multiple domains, from practical technologies to fundamental concepts of social organization. In law and governance, Mesopotamian innovations established patterns that would endure for millennia. The concept of written law codes, from Ur-Nammu and Hammurabi to modern constitutions, reflects the Mesopotamian insight that justice requires clear, accessible standards rather than arbitrary judgments. Archaeological evidence for this legacy includes later legal collections showing clear Mesopotamian influence, from Middle Assyrian laws to the biblical legal codes. Even specific legal principles, like the presumption of innocence and the requirement for material evidence in criminal cases, have antecedents in Babylonian legal practice. Urban planning and architecture represent another enduring legacy. The gridded street layout, public spaces, specialized districts, and defensive walls characteristic of Mesopotamian cities establish patterns repeated across civilizations. Archaeological research shows remarkable continuity in urban design concepts from Ur to Rome and beyond. The very concept of the city as an organized, administered space with specialized functions and public infrastructure began in the land between the rivers. Writing, humanity's most transformative technology, underwent its first and most crucial development in Mesopotamia. Though Egyptian hieroglyphics developed nearly simultaneously, the Mesopotamian contribution proved more influential through its adaptation by diverse cultures. Archaeological evidence for this transmission includes early alphabetic inscriptions from Ugarit and Byblos, showing clear influence from cuneiform, establishing a lineage connecting Sumerian pictographs to modern alphabets. Mathematical and scientific concepts from Mesopotamia continue to shape our daily experience. The sexagesimal, base 60 system survives in our measurement of time, 60 seconds, 60 minutes, and angles, 360 degrees in a circle. Astronomical terminology, zodiacal constellations, and methods for predicting celestial events derive substantially from Babylonian origins. Even our 7-day week, with its pattern of regular work and rest, has Mesopotamian antecedents. Literary and mythological themes from Mesopotamia echo through subsequent cultural traditions. The flood narrative from the Epic of Gilgamesh finds parallels in the biblical Noah story and flood myths worldwide. Concepts of cosmic order established through divine conflict appear in Hesiod's Theogony and other creation accounts. Archaeological evidence for this transmission includes fragments of Mesopotamian literary texts discovered at sites throughout the ancient Near East, demonstrating their wide dissemination. Perhaps most fundamentally, the Mesopotamian experiment with civilization established the basic template for complex human societies. The integration of religious legitimacy with political authority, the development of specialized economic roles, the use of writing for administrative control, the creation of monumental architecture expressing collective identity, all these essential features of later civilizations appeared first in the cities of Sumer and Babylon. From dust to eternity, today the great cities of Mesopotamia lie buried beneath desert sands. At Ur, the ziggurat still rises above the plain, its mud brick core exposed to the elements after 4 millennia. At Babylon, reconstructed walls and gateways hint at former splendor. Throughout Iraq, countless tells, artificial mounds created by centuries of human habitation, conceal cities yet unexcavated, their stories still waiting to be told. Yet despite the physical decay of these ancient sites, their legacy remains vibrantly alive. When we organize our days by hours and minutes, we think in Mesopotamian terms. When we establish written laws to govern society, we follow their example. When we build cities with planned streets and public spaces, we implement their innovations. When we study the stars and track celestial movements, we continue their patient observations. The journey of civilization that began beside the Tigris and Euphrates, humanity's first attempt to create complex urban societies governed by law rather than by force alone, continues today. The specific empires have long since crumbled, but the fundamental insights about how humans can live together in large, organized communities endure. From the earliest village at Eridu to mighty Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar, Mesopotamian civilization represents humanity's first and most consequential social experiment. The challenges they faced, balancing religious tradition with political innovation, managing limited resources through technological development, establishing justice through written law, preserving knowledge through institutional structures, remain our challenges today. In the clay tablets recording grain distributions, astronomical observations, legal judgments, and timeless stories, we find not merely historical artifacts, but mirrors reflecting our own continuing struggle to create societies worthy of human potential. From those first uncertain steps towards civilization, taken by Sumerian farmers creating irrigation channels and priests recording rations on clay tablets, to our own complex global civilization, runs an unbroken thread of human ingenuity and aspiration. From clay to cosmos, from dust to eternity, the legacy of Mesopotamia endures not as ancient history, but as living heritage, the beginning of a story in which we all remain participants. Between the rivers, humanity first learned to be civilized. The lesson continues. Echoes in time. The sun sets over the ziggurat at Ur, casting long shadows across ruins that have endured for over 4,000 years. In the fading light, the massive brickwork, still bearing the stamps of Ur-Nammu's name, glows golden red against the darkening sky. Here, where kings once processed up sacred staircases to commune with the moon god, Nana, tourists and archaeologists now walk carefully among the remnants of humanity's first great urban experiment. Ruins in the desert modern Iraq cradles the physical remains of Mesopotamian civilization, though time, war, and human negligence have taken a severe toll. At Uruk, where humanity's first city rose beside an ancient channel of the Euphrates, German archaeologists have uncovered only about 10% of the vast site. What remains are eroded mud brick walls, the faint outlines of temples, and scattered pottery shards, humble remnants of a city that once housed 50,000 souls. Babylon presents a more complex picture. Robert Koldewey's meticulous excavations between 1899 and 1917 uncovered substantial portions of Nebuchadnezzar's capital, including the famous Ishtar Gate, with its brilliant blue-glazed bricks and molded relief animals. Yet what visitors see today reflects problematic reconstruction efforts under Saddam Hussein, who sought to appropriate ancient glory for political purposes. His hastily built replicas, using modern bricks stamped with his own name alongside the ancient kings, sit incongruously atop genuine ruins dating back nearly 3 millennia. The ziggurat at Ur remains the best preserved in Iraq, with its massive core still rising 40 feet above the plain. Excavated by Leonard Woolley in the 1920s and 1930s, the site reveals much of what we know about Sumerian urban planning, royal mortuary practices, and daily life. U.S. military activity during the Iraq War damaged portions of the site, with helicopter rotor wash eroding exposed mud brick structures and vibrations from heavy vehicles causing incremental collapse. Other sites face even greater challenges. Nimrud and Nineveh suffered deliberate destruction by ISIS, who viewed these pre-Islamic monuments as idolatrous. Extensive looting during periods of conflict has devastated countless smaller tells, with artifacts illegally excavated and sold to international collectors. Climate change brings new threats, as increasing desertification and unpredictable rainfall patterns accelerate erosion of exposed ruins. Despite these challenges, archaeological work continues. Satellite imagery has identified hundreds of previously unknown settlements, while new techniques, from ground-penetrating radar to drone photogrammetry, allow non-invasive study of sites too fragile or dangerous to excavate conventionally. Each season brings new discoveries illuminating aspects of Mesopotamian life previously hidden from view.